The world outside window 14A was a nauseating blur of blue and brown as the Airbus A350 screamed toward the earth, the howl of the engines mixing with the terrified shrieks of 300 passengers. With the captain slumped unconscious over the controls, a former cargo pilot stood up, her face a mask of impossible calm, and walked toward the cockpit. What the two elite F-16 pilots scrambled to intercept this plummeting airliner didn't know was that they were about to hear a ghost on the radio because legends aren't supposed to fly, coach. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Now back to our story. The morning of October 26, 2019 was crisp and clear at JFK, the kind of perfect autumn day that makes you forget. Air travel can be anything but routine. Passengers for American Airlines Flight 229 to Los Angeles shuffled through Gate B32, a river of humanity flowing toward the gleaming Airbus A350 waiting on the tarmac. Tucked into that river was a woman who moved with an economy of motion that belied her casual appearance. Anya Sharma, late 30s, wore a faded Navy pilot's jacket, its leather worn soft at the cuffs, over a simple gray t-shirt and jeans. A scuffed flight bag, the kind that holds headsets and logbooks, was slung over her shoulder. Her black hair was pulled into a tight, practical bun, and her dark, almond-shaped eyes scanned the boarding area with a practiced assessment, missing nothing. She was an island of stillness in the chaos, another anonymous pilot deadheading home after a long haul, or so everyone assumed. Anya found her seat, 14A, a window seat just behind the wing. It was a compulsion, a need to see the flaps, the slats, the engine nacelles. She needed to see the machine breathe. The middle seat was blessedly empty, a small mercy on a 6-hour flight. The aisle seat, however, was quickly occupied by a man in his late 40s, his expensive suit slightly rumpled, radiating an energy that filled the entire row. He immediately clocked her jacket. "Heading home after a trip?" he asked, his voice booming slightly over the cabin announcements as he wrestled a briefcase into the overhead bin. "Something like that," Anya replied, her voice quiet, offering a polite but distant smile. She hoped it would be the end of the conversation. "Cargo or commercial?" he pressed, settling into his seat with a sigh. "I'm in finance, fly this route twice a month. Always wondered what it's like on your side of the door." "Cargo," she said, the word a shield. "Overnight freight, mostly boxes." "Still beats pushing numbers," he chuckled. "Being in control up there must be a great feeling." Anya just nodded, turning her attention to the window. In control. He had no idea. The truth was, her life was a carefully constructed fortress built to keep the past at bay. Before she flew converted Boeing 767s full of cardboard boxes for a freight carrier, she was Major Anya Valkyrie Sharma of the United States Air Force. The name Valkyrie wasn't a nickname. It was a mythology, whispered in the ready rooms of fighter squadrons from Nellis to Kandahar. For 12 years, she had flown the F-16 Viper, an aircraft she knew better than she knew herself. She'd led combat sorties over landscapes that only existed as grainy satellite images to the public, racked up aerial engagement records that were sealed in classified files, and executed strategic strikes so precise they shifted the balance of entire conflicts. Her medals, including a distinguished Flying Cross she never wore, were in a shoebox in the back of her closet. She had commanded the most elite aggressor squadron in the world, training new pilots by simulating the tactics of enemy fighters with a terrifying accuracy. But 3 years ago, after a mission that went sideways over the Syrian desert, a mission that ended with a wingman's empty parachute against a setting sun, something inside her broke. The adrenaline, the danger, the weight of life and death decisions, it had all become a poison. So she had vanished, resigning her commission with no fanfare, her record sealed, her legend left to fade into rumor. To the world and to the talkative man in seat 14C, She was just Anya Sharma. The ordinary was her sanctuary. The flight attendants, crisp and professional in their uniforms, moved through the cabin, their smiles practiced. The lead attendant, a woman named Sarah, with warm eyes, paused by Anya's row. "You're a pilot?" she asked, a hint of professional courtesy in her tone. "Cargo," Anya confirmed again. "Just a passenger today." "Well, Captain Evans is at the stick today," Sarah said with a reassuring smile. "One of our most senior captains. You're in good hands. Just sit back and let us do the work for a change." Anya returned the smile, a genuine one this time. She appreciated the professionalism. She knew the immense training and discipline it took to operate in this environment. But she also knew that flying a pre-programmed route in a stable automated airliner was a different galaxy from wrestling a 20,000-pound fighter through a high G turn with surface-to-air missiles painting you from below. They were both flying, but it was like comparing a concert pianist to a battlefield surgeon. The massive Rolls-Royce engines of the A350 spooled up with a deep resonant hum, a sound that vibrated right through the soles of Anya's feet. She watched the ground crew disconnect the jet bridge, their movements a familiar ballet of hand signals and safety checks. The pushback was smooth. The captain's voice, deep and reassuring, filled the cabin. "Good morning, folks. From the flight deck, this is Captain Evans. We're looking at a smooth ride out to the coast today. Flight time of about 5 hours and 45 minutes. We'll be climbing up to our cruising altitude of 38,000 feet. Weather in LA is sunny and 75 degrees, so for those of you leaving the New York chill behind, you've got something to look forward to." The businessman was already hammering away on his laptop. Across the aisle, a young mother was trying to distract a toddler with a brightly colored tablet. It was all so beautifully, achingly normal. This was the piece she had traded her wings for. The takeoff roll was powerful, pushing her back into her seat with a familiar pressure. The A350 lifted gracefully into the autumn sky, the sprawling suburbs of Long Island shrinking below. Anya tracked their climb out, her internal instruments noting the pitch angle, the bank, the retraction of the flaps. It was a habit she couldn't break, a ghost of the pilot she used to be, always flying the plane even from the cheap seats. An hour melted away. Beverage service came and went. The businessman fell asleep, his head lolling against the headrest. The cabin settled into the hypnotic drone of a long-haul flight. Anya was reading an article on advanced avionics in a trade magazine when she felt it. It wasn't turbulence. It was a slight, almost imperceptible change in the engine's vibration, a harmonic dissonance that no one else would ever notice. But to her it was like a single sour note in a symphony. Her head snapped up, her eyes fixed on the massive engine hanging under the wing outside her window. Visually, everything was perfect, but her ears, her senses, honed by thousands of hours of listening to the language of machines, told her something was wrong. Then came a subtle shudder through the floorboards, there and gone, in a heartbeat. The businessman snorted in his sleep but didn't wake. Anya's heart rate didn't change, but her mind was suddenly razor sharp, every bit of her training coming online. There it was again, a slightly harder jolt this time, accompanied by a faint groaning sound from the wing. It was the sound of an airframe under an unusual strain. The intercom crackled. "Folks, Captain Evans here again. We're just encountering a little unexpected weather. Nothing to be alarmed about, but we're going to start a descent to find some smoother air. We'd ask you to please return to your seats and fasten your seat belts at this time. Flight attendants, please secure the galley." Anya's blood ran cold. That wasn't the voice of a captain encountering weather. The slight hesitation, the carefully chosen words, that was the voice of a pilot trying not to cause a panic. A descent to find smoother air from 38,000 feet was a significant deviation, suggesting something far more serious than a few bumps. The businessman woke with a start. "What's going on?" he mumbled, looking around in confusion. "Just a precaution," Anya said, her voice steady, betraying none of the alarm bells screaming in her head. "They're just being careful." But she knew this was more than careful. Then the bottom dropped out. The A350 pitched forward violently, a sickening lurch that sent unsecured laptops, drinks, and bodies straining against their seatbelts. Screams erupted throughout the cabin. Anya's hands instinctively braced against the seat in front of her, her core muscles tightening, her body moving with the aircraft out of pure instinct. The plane then rolled sharply to the left, not a gentle bank, but an aggressive, uncontrolled movement. The toddler across the aisle began to wail, a sound of pure terror. "Oh my God, we're crashing!" someone shrieked from the back. The flight attendants were clinging to seats, their faces ashen. Sarah, the lead attendant, was speaking frantically into an intercom phone near the forward galley. This wasn't turbulence. This was a loss of control. Anya unbuckled her belt. Her movement was decisive, a single fluid motion. "Ma'am, you have to sit down," a junior flight attendant yelled, her voice cracking with fear. Anya ignored her, moving up the bucking aisle with the low-centered gait of someone used to unstable surfaces. She reached the forward galley just as Sarah hung up the phone, her hand trembling. "I'm a pilot," Anya said, her voice low but cutting through the noise. "What is the situation in the cockpit?" Sarah stared at her, her eyes wide with terror and confusion. "Captain Evans. He's unresponsive. First Officer Miller is on his own. He said the controls are gone." That was all Anya needed to hear. The carefully constructed walls around her past crumbled to dust. There was no cargo pilot anymore. There was only Valkyrie. "Open the door," she commanded. "I can't. FAA regulations," Sarah stammered. "Open the door, now." The command wasn't a request. It was an order, forged in the crucible of combat leadership, and Sarah complied without another word. She fumbled with a key, twisted a lock, and the reinforced cockpit door swung open. The scene inside was chaos, warning chimes and a synthesized voice repeating, "Stall! Stall!" filled the small space. Red and amber lights flashed across the instrument panel. Captain Evans was slumped forward in the left seat, his harness the only thing holding him up. In the right seat, a young first officer, Miller, was wrestling with the side stick controller, his face drenched in sweat, his knuckles white. The plane was in a steep, accelerating dive. "I'm a pilot," Anya shouted over the alarms, wedging herself between the two seats. "What's your status?" Miller glanced at her, his eyes wild with panic. "He just collapsed. I think it's a massive heart attack. Then the fly-by-wire system went haywire. I have no control. It's just pitching down. Autopilot's disengaged. I'm locked out." Anya's eyes swept the primary flight display. Altitude 24,000 feet and dropping like a stone. Airspeed 400 knots and climbing, dangerously close to the aircraft's maximum design speed. This wasn't just a simple malfunction. This was a catastrophic failure cascade. "Get on the radio," Anya ordered Miller, her voice a whip crack of authority that cut through his panic. "Declare a Mayday. Tell them we have an incapacitated captain, a flight control computer failure, and we are in an uncontrolled descent." She had to get to the captain's seat. "Move him," she said to Miller. "We have to get him out of the chair." Together, they wrestled with the captain's dead weight, a near impossible task in the cramped, lurching cockpit. But they managed to recline his seat and pull him partially clear, enough for Anya to slide into the left seat. Her hands closed around the side stick. It felt dead, unresponsive. The computers that translated pilot inputs into control surface movements were failing, but they weren't completely gone. There was a flicker of response, a ghost of control. She could work with this. She had brought home a Viper with half its tail blown off. This was just a bigger, heavier problem. "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday, New York Center, American 229. Miller's voice was shaking, but clear on the radio. "Incapacitated captain, Flight control emergency. We are descending uncontrollably through 21,000 feet. Anya disconnected the auto-thrust, manually pulling the thrust levers back to idle. The howl of the engines subsided slightly. It wouldn't stop the dive, but it would slow the acceleration. She then tried to engage the alternate flight control law, a backup mode with fewer protections. A new warning flashed. Flight control law degraded. Yes, but it was better than nothing. She felt a slight return of authority in the stick. Hope, fragile and fleeting. American 229, New York Center. Roger your Mayday. Say souls on board and fuel remaining. The controller's voice was unnaturally calm. 288 souls, 7 hours of fuel, Miller responded. Anya was fighting the dive, using small, precise inputs, coaxing the wounded giant. The nose began to come up, slowly, painfully. The terrifying stall warning fell silent, replaced by an even more urgent, overspeed clacker. New York Center, American 229, we are fighting the controls. It appears to be a multiple flight computer failure. Request vectors to the nearest suitable airport with a long runway, Anya said, her voice steady. She wasn't just a passenger anymore. She was flying this plane. American 229, nearest suitable is Philadelphia International, bearing 210, 70 miles. Turn left heading 210, descend and maintain 10,000. Anya initiated the turn. The plane responded sluggishly, like a beast fighting the leash. Beside her, Miller was staring at her, his panic replaced by a dawning sense of awe. He was watching a master at work. The descent stabilized at 15,000 feet, but the aircraft was still a wild thing, bucking and shuddering. Every correction Anya made was a battle. American 229, be advised. We are scrambling 2 F-16s from the 177th Fighter Wing to intercept and provide assistance. Their call sign Ghost Flight, ETA 5 minutes. F-16s, Vipers, her jet. A bitter irony twisted in Anya's gut. For a moment she was back in that cockpit, the canopy closing over her, the smell of jet. Fuel, the world a perfect sphere of blue. She shoved the memory down. Roger Center, tell Ghost Flight we appreciate the eyes. The 2 F-16s materialized out of the haze a few minutes later, sleek, deadly predators racketing the wounded airliner. They settled into a loose formation off each wing, their pilots visible as helmeted silhouettes. American 229, this is Ghost 1. A calm professional voice crackled on the frequency. We're on your wing. What's your status? Ghost 1, we have a critical flight control malfunction. We're in a degraded control law, flying manually. Aircraft is unstable, but manageable for now, Anya replied. Roger that, 229. You're holding it steady. Philly is 40 miles out. Plan is for a straight-in approach to runway 27. Right, you got this. Ghost 1, Anya said, making a decision. I need you to be my eyes. My flight displays are flickering. I need you to call out my altitude, airspeed, and descent rate on final. Keep me honest. There was a brief pause. This was an unusual request. Roger 229, who am I speaking with? Anya sighed. Her quiet life was over. The fortress she had built was about to be leveled. Former Air Force, she said, her voice tight. Flew Vipers. The radio went silent for a few seconds. The F-16 pilot was likely processing this. A former Viper driver flying a crippled Airbus. Copy that, Ghost 1 said, his tone shifting subtly. Just for our situational awareness, what was your call sign? Here it was, the ghost in the machine, the name she had buried 3 years ago. She took a breath. She looked at the F-16 off her left wing, a machine that was once an extension of her own body. Ghost 1, she said, her voice clear and strong. Call sign was Valkyrie. Absolute stunned silence on the frequency. Anya could picture it perfectly. 2 young fighter pilots in their cockpits, looking at each other across the sky, their minds reeling. Every Viper pilot knew the name Valkyrie. They had studied her tactics at weapons school. They had heard the classified stories of her exploits. She was the ghost, the legend you hoped to one day be half as good as, and she was flying a dying Airbus with 300 people on board. "Holy!" the voice of Ghost 2, the wingman, whispered over the radio before being cut off. Then Ghost 1 came back, his voice completely changed. Gone was the professional detachment. In its place was pure, unadulterated reverence. "Ma'am, Captain Sharma, this is Major Davis. It's an honor. We've got your 6, Valkyrie, all the way down." Anya felt a lump form in her throat, but she swallowed it. There was no time for emotion. "Glad to have you, Ghost Flight. Now let's get these people on the ground." As they began the approach to Philadelphia, the situation deteriorated. A new alarm began to sound, indicating a failure in the remaining hydraulic system. The controls grew heavier, more sluggish. It was like trying to steer a battleship with a canoe paddle. "Miller, when I call for flaps and gear, I need you to extend them one step at a time. The configuration change is going to make her even harder to handle," Anya commanded. "Roger," Miller said, his training now fully engaged. "Understood. Valkyrie, you're at 10 miles, 3,000 feet. Ghost 1's voice was a lifeline in her ear. "Airspeed is 190 knots. You are right on the glide slope. It's beautiful." Anya could see the runway now, a long strip of concrete lined with the flashing lights of emergency vehicles. It looked impossibly small. This was it. One shot. No go-around. The damaged aircraft wouldn't survive it. "Gear down," she ordered. 3 green lights confirmed the gear was locked, but the added drag made the plane want to sink. She countered with a burst of thrust, her hand movements precise, economical. Sweat dripped into her eyes, but she didn't blink. 5 miles, Valkyrie. 1,500 feet. Airspeed 160. Stay with it, ma'am." Her hands and feet were in constant motion, a desperate dance with a dying machine. The runway rushed toward them. "This is the cockpit," she said into the cabin intercom, her voice devoid of emotion. "Brace for impact. Brace, brace, brace." 500 feet, Ghost 1 called. "You're a legend, ma'am." The runway threshold passed beneath them. She eased the thrust levers to idle, flared just enough to cushion the landing. The main gear hit the tarmac with a jarring impact, harder than she wanted, but they were down. The nose wheel slammed down a second later. She deployed reverse thrusters and stood on the brakes, but the plane began to veer violently to the left, toward the grass. "No, no, no," she muttered, fighting the rudder pedals, applying asymmetric thrust. The screech of tortured tires filled the air. For a horrifying moment, she thought they were going to lose it, that she would save them from the sky only to kill them on the ground. But the nose began to swing back. The A350 straightened out, decelerating rapidly down the center of the runway. It rolled to a stop with thousands of feet to spare, surrounded by a sea of fire trucks and ambulances. Silence descended on the cockpit, broken only by the sound of their own ragged breathing. Anya slowly, deliberately, shut down the engines. She set the parking brake. Her hands, which had been rock steady for the last 30 minutes, began to shake uncontrollably. "We're down," Miller whispered, staring at her as if she were a goddess. "You did it." Anya just nodded, leaning her head back against the seat, utterly spent. The cockpit door burst open, and Sarah, the lead flight attendant, was there, her face a mask of tears and disbelief. Who are you?" she sobbed. Before Anya could answer, the radio crackled one last time. It was Major Davis, Ghost 1. His voice was thick with emotion. "Valkyrie, that was the greatest piece of flying I have ever seen in my life. Welcome home, ma'am." The evacuation was a blur. Paramedics rushed in to attend to Captain Evans, who was alive, but in critical condition. As Anya finally stepped off the plane onto the tarmac, the gravity of it all hit her. She was surrounded by airport officials, FAA investigators, and 2 young pilots in flight suits, their helmets under their arms. Major Davis and his wingman stood before her, and they both snapped to attention. "Ma'am," Davis said, his voice choked, "they broke the mold with you." Anya looked past them, at the passengers huddled on the tarmac, many of them crying with relief. The businessman from 14C saw her and pushed through the crowd, his face pale with shock. You're not just a cargo pilot," he stammered. "Not anymore, I guess," she said quietly. A reporter with a microphone appeared out of nowhere. "Captain Sharma, is it true you're the legendary fighter pilot, Valkyrie?" Anya looked at the reporter, at the flashing cameras, and up at the sky where the two F-16s were making a low, slow pass over the field in tribute. Her sanctuary of anonymity was gone, burned away at 38,000 feet. She had tried to run from her past, but in the end, her past had saved 300 people. "I'm not a hero," she said, her voice barely a whisper, but it was a lie, and she knew it. "I'm a pilot, and today I did my job." She had flown the mission, she had brought them all home, and in the setting sun over Philadelphia, the legend of Valkyrie was reborn. Make sure to subscribe to Skybound Stories and check out our other amazing stories by clicking the videos on your screen right now.